Hello, everyone, and welcome to Artists Offstage. Last week, we got to talk with Mia Athey, one of our resident artists, mezzo-sopranos. Uh, this week, we are talking with our assistant technical director, Frankie Charles. How are you doing, Frankie?
I'm doing great, Pablo. How are you?
Good, good. Um, so like I said, we just want to get to know you a little bit better and a little bit about what it is that you do in the resident artist program, since your role is a little bit different than what we might normally think of the resident artist being. So let's start off pretty broadly here. What is your story?
My story. Well, we'll start with how I identify just
Mhm.
personally. I am a trans man, and so I use he, him pronouns. My family came from Cuba in the 60s, so I identify as Cuban American. My family came to uh, a Chicago suburb, a northern Chicago suburb in the 60s. They made the conscious choice not to go to Florida. And from there, I was born and raised. I went through the same school system that my mother did.
Mhm.
And our experiences were wildly different.
Mm.
But nonetheless, very important to me and her.
Mhm.
And I went into theater when I was very young. I tell people I started when I was in middle school.
Okay.
Was like the assistant to the soundboard operator. um, but I started there and now have nothing to do. Like I don't do anything with sound that much anymore.
Okay.
um, so I think it's just kind of funny that I started there.
Mhm.
But um, I had a pretty good high school theater program to go into, and from there went to the theater school at DePaul University,
Mm.
um, and I got my BFA in theater technology, which sets me up to be a technical director pretty well. I met Josh, who is the TD, while at USITT, which is a um, national conference that is held once every year. Was supposed to be in Houston this year, but COVID. It's going
Yeah.
to be online next year, which is pretty cool. But
Mhm.
through that and the gateway uh, the gateway program at USITT, I was able to connect with more trans people, more queer people,
Mhm.
find more people that looked like me in the industry while at this conference with other big names in the production game, which has been really rewarding. And like I
Mhm.
said, through a lot of those contacts, I met Josh and Karen, and it's kind of how it's a little bit how I got here.
Yeah.
um,
I mean, you
so
you mentioned a little bit about how the kind of the importance of seeing people who look like you or who identify as you do. Um, why is that particularly important, in the technical theater world?
well, in technical theater, I don't know many technical directors that are people of color. In opera, let alone like in theater in general, off the top of my head, I know that the technical director at Santa Fe
Mhm.
is a person of color, and he's great. But other than that, there's not many queer identifying um, people in the TD world. There are many people in the technical field. They
Mhm.
don't really make it to institutions where they can freely identify. That's, I think, something that is a new a new and growing change
Mhm.
as we kind of touch on a lot of interesting topics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in your training and in your schooling, have there been any teachers along the way, whether they were actually your teachers or maybe someone who took on that role for you, that had made an especially big impact on your life?
In high school, I will say that I had a fantastic teacher. His name was Tim Conway.
Mhm.
He is probably the reason I ended up at DePaul. He told me that it was going to be tough, but that at the end of the day, it was going to be worth it, and it was very tough. And its worth is still being proven to shown, or is still being shown. But in terms of what it has allowed me access to has been really beneficial. But with Mr. Conway's support, yeah, theater in high school was a place where I could be myself, was a
Yeah.
place where I felt safe.
Mhm.
And so I kind of take his fostering of that like young teenager of like that I was,
Mhm.
and I try to bring that to the other places that I work. Um, and so it's creating a sense of community that in his creating a sense of community for me, I have widened that community for myself.
Mm, yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah,
Kind of bringing other people into the fold, especially people of color and queer folks as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, my next question here is, have there been, who have been your biggest cheerleaders throughout your life? Um, I mean, you mentioned this particular teacher. Have there been other people in your life, maybe that weren't necessarily connected to you as teachers, but who were big cheerleaders for you along the way?
Yeah, definitely. Within the community that I found at USITT, um, those folks have been amazing cheerleaders because many of them are major names in the production industry, and just them in passing being able to look at me and tell me that like whether I they may not know that I'm freaking out, but when they look at me and they tell me that I deserve to be in a room, it
Mhm.
it makes a difference,
Mhm.
because whether or not I feel like I should be there, I deserve to be there. I've been through the years of university. I don't believe in paying dues in terms of like unpaid internships and stuff, and so um, like taking that out of the equation, we all deserve to be there.
Yeah,
um, and and having someone say that makes it a little bit more impactful. So it's to
yeah,
those folks that I
that's
think that.
awesome. Very cool. So I'm not necessarily the most familiar with the technical theater career path.
Mhm.
What would you say are the biggest rewards and challenges of that career path?
Um, in terms of rewards, we don't get many uh, literal awards. There are no Tonys for technical directors, but I will say things that I would consider a reward in my path would be getting to work on new works,
Mm,
um, being able to foster the growth of a new production, is something I really value and would. I've only gotten to do a couple of times. Edward Tulane as a fantastic
yeah,
example. That
yeah,
was
yeah.
going to be awesome.
It will be awesome when we
It,
are able to do it again.
yeah, it will be awesome. Get excited. uh, but then challenges in a position like mine where uh, you can be temporary.
Mm,
You're constantly building and rebuilding different relationships, which in and of itself is rewarding, because you get this massive network of people.
sure.
Uh, but then uprooting yourself to move on to the next thing,
Yeah.
pretty difficult. Leaving Chicago for me was, I was ready, but it was still kind of hard because that was the artistic home that I had lived in for 4 years.
Right.
And then I had people that were like, you should go to New York, but I don't like New York, so why would I go? Minneapolis is rewarding in and of itself because of the different communities that I've found here, just like through the opera and then uh, through other relationships that I've fostered over the years. I've found an amazing network of people in this city alone, or in these cities alone, that just make they make up the reward,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah.
It's really the people, because I don't typically get too attached to a show because of the quick turnarounds that we usually have to do. In many cases, an opera is an outlier. Like, you don't get to hold on to your set.
Sure.
You pretty much just get to throw it out at the end, and that's both cathartic and also a little sad because you're watching the end of a production. But getting to see things live on just in opera is always, it's amazingly rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you kind of briefly touched on this already a little bit, but your position in the resident artist program is different than the singer track or even the pianist track. This is something new, something that we as Minnesota Opera, we haven't done before. So tell us a little bit about what is your component of the resident artist program? What does it mean to be the resident artist assistant technical director?
So basically, I want to say go-between. It's been 12 years since the Minnesota Opera has had an assistant technical director, and I will say that the benefits of having an assistant technical director, like, put very simply, just mean that there is someone else to look over math and like lists and budgets and draftings and things. And so to get deeper into that, Josh, our technical director, will give me something that we're working on. So let's use the example. The gala last year was,
Okay.
they wanted it to have like a loose Greek island theme. And so I was tasked with drafting, and I use a computer program called AutoCAD.
Mhm.
I took a series of pictures and just kind of made a series of facades that got to sit next to each other and then were layered to create a fun, like, light up Greek motif
Okay.
for the stage of the gala.
Mhm.
And so, put in context for a show, that could be anything from an entire element for a scene. An element is so anything that the performers interact with or might not interact with, or that frames the context of where they are, anything that provides setting. I could be given something like that from the TD and from the designer, and typically Josh will have gone through and figured out the basics of the materials and some of the methods that he wants me to articulate through a drafting, and I'll go in and break apart the component that I'm working on, so that I'm literally just, like, from the ground up, like, how many pieces of steel does it take to build this? How many pieces of wood? How does the steel and the wood interact with each other? What kind of mediums do we need to use to adhere steel to wood, or vice versa? And So then I'll take that and I'll draft it, and I will then present it to Josh, who will go over it with me, and we'll throw around ideas on how things could be executed. Or I'll go downstairs and I'll talk to some of our shop guys and be like, hey, have you done this before? I don't think I've done this before. Are there methods? Are there construction methods that you've used that you could walk me through that I might be able to then articulate in this drafting, so that we're all talking in the same language, and I can just hand you this thing and you can take it away and make it a reality. And I will say that my favorite reaction of designers is when they walk into the room and they're like, this is so much bigger than I thought it was going to be, or this is smaller than I thought it was going to be. And I'm like, but we got these dimensions from you.
You told us how big it needed to be.
Yeah, so that's always, and I've even had that kind of moment walking into a space being like, wow, this was so much bigger than I thought it was going to be. And I think it's really entertaining, because something that the Minnesota Opera provides me in my experience is working with a union shop. And so I'm not actually allowed to go down and build anything, which is, it actually took me quite a bit to I'm still getting used to it. But especially when we're like at the Ordway, I'll like go to pick something up and I'm like, oh, I can't pick that up. It's not my job. But like, typically I'm in a position where it's like, I got to get up and go because there may not be other people around to go and do it. And that's part of the assistant ship of it. Being able to provide the best support that I'm able for my TD. And then in larger terms, like I've had the pleasure of working with the Project Opera. I've had the pleasure of working with Project Opera as their TD, and that was also a fun experience because we were in the lab, and that's a very different environment than the Ordway. And so getting to see and experience these things, and getting to also then advocate for anything that the other raps might want to do. They're working on Onegin scenes right now, and I'm just kind of providing that middle ground so that our assistant director, our resident rap director, our resident director can communicate to me what she needs from production, and then I can just communicate it right to production so that we're not chasing a bunch of people around just looking for information.
Yeah. And that's such a useful point person to have in all of this process when there are so many people involved.
Yeah, because I mean, even within our production department alone, it's like there's Carrie who's east of here, who's not in Minnesota anymore, but still scheduling our building.
Like, how she's able to do that, I don't know. She is brilliant.
More power to her. Like, that's why stage managers are important, and that's listen to your stage managers, folks.
Shout out to all the stage managers out there. You are
very of the stage manager.
So stepping a little bit away from what you actually do in your work and all of that, I'd like to have you complete a sentence for me. Okay. When I am not working, I am usually blank. Sleeping.
On sleeping. It's interesting because, like, I wish I could say like reading or going for a walk, but in all honesty, when I'm not in my production mode, I am pretty much sleeping and trying to regain a lot of energy. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a taxing, I guess, a job,
Yeah,
in physically, mentally, in so many ways.
yeah. Managing folks uh from this position is definitely um it's just always interesting, because as the resident artist, ATD, I do have to remember that any systems that I put in place for myself, um, should be translatable to the next person. And so, as one of the first people in this position, I'm acutely conscious to, um, the processes that I put down, and just making sure that it is as accessible as humanly possible for whoever comes next.
Yeah. Um, so I like to end these with kind of on a positive note. Um, Obviously, with COVID and all of these different things like that are happening in the world, we need something that is uplifting every now and then. So where are you currently finding joy or inspiration these days?
Um, I will say my joy right now is coming from, well, it constantly comes from my cat Homer. He's he gets me out of bed in the morning, because if I spend too much time in bed, he'll yell at me. And and inspiration, I'll say that, uh, I've been enjoying, I guess, the privilege of being able to, be a part of art equity sessions. I'm going to plug them if that's okay.
Yeah,
Um,
go for it.
they're doing a series of sessions, for Black, Indigenous people of color, surviving predominantly white institutions. And that has been wildly, like, inspirational for me, just seeing these, um, prominent prominent members of, like, the the arts and, like, theater communities, um like, holding space for other people of color, and being able to create a community around, survival. As so many of us are just kind of surviving through COVID, but also surviving, um the the uprising that is happening, and bringing it context, and bringing us tools to be able to make change, and tangible change at that, within our institutions. Is just, it's amazingly powerful, and I thank them, and honestly I thank you, Pablo, for this space. um and yeah.
Yeah, no, that's so important. And the more that we can um, share stories, share a little bit about ourselves, so that people get to know us as people, um, and just kind of be and feel seen in all of these spaces. It's so important. So Frankie, thank you so much for spending the time with me today. Um, I hope that we all get to know you even better over the coming year, and that we all wish you incredible success in your technical career. So thanks again for spending this time with us. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, take care.